Welcome to Lifestyle Solopreneur, the community for entrepreneurs who put lifestyle first. Join your host, Flavia Barris, as she interviews successful lifestyle solopreneurs and shares ideas to help you find the perfect balance between lifestyle, business, and self. Flavia is an attorney, marketing expert, and founder of several online academies. She's been featured in major media, including BBC World News, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Post, ESPN Television, and more. Join us for this episode of Lifestyle Solopreneur. Hey, Lifestyle Solopreneurs. Today we get to meet with Mickie Kennedy. He founded the ereleases.com website 27 years ago to help small businesses, authors, and startups increase their visibility and credibility through press release distribution. He lives in the Baltimore area. Welcome to the show, Mickie.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Really great to have you on the opposite coast. I just love, sometimes I have guests on the show who they're calling in from 10 time zones ahead, because it's a global world we live in right now. I mean, we could, with the power of Zoom and phone and all the things, really just kind of all be in the same place at the same time in some ways. So Mickie, tell me a little bit about you and how you got into press releases. What's sort of that story that took you from what you were doing previous to that to where you are today?
So for me, I graduated from an MFA program in creative writing about 30 years ago. And I kind of felt like I was going to wait tables full time because I'd been doing that part time through undergraduate and graduate school. And what I discovered was working full time, 50, 60 hours a week, waiting tables was not everything it was cracked up to be. And so I decided I wanted a safe office job after a summer of doing that. And I got hired at a telecom research startup as employee number 3. And among the many things they wanted me to do, because I had writing in my background, they wanted me to write and send out press releases. I inherited a brand new state-of-the-art fax machine. I think I spent $5,000 on it, and it held 100 numbers. And unfortunately, our media list was 150 numbers. So I would program it with 100 numbers, hit send. It would literally take all day, sometimes part of the second day with those 100 numbers. And then I would have to delete those numbers and put the other 50. And I tried to make an argument for buying a second fax machine so I could not have to waste so many hours programming numbers. But I lost because $5,000 was a lot of money back 30 years ago. But I would send these releases out that I was taught how to write by the owner, and nothing happened. And the owner, who was a telecom attorney, goes, "Yeah, nothing ever really does, but I just feel like we should continue to do it." And I just said, wow, I'm losing a day and a half at least here every month or so. I got to figure out how to do this better. And so I realized we were publishing just pure data. And the owner had learned that data was really important for the media, but he didn't realize, and what I soon realized looking at articles was, nobody's publishing real data. They're publishing stories, and they follow a story arc. And so I took our most recent data, which I think was Caribbean telecom traffic to and from the US, and I looked at it. I noticed that one country stood out as an outlier. I can't even remember it because it's not a country I think most people have even heard of. And it had more inbound, outbound traffic than all the others. And when I asked one of the employees, who was a research analyst there, why, he goes, "Oh, that's the call center for 1-900 numbers." At the time, 30 years ago, a 1-900 number, you know, for 50 cents a minute, you could call a pre-recorded 1-900 number and you would get maybe a horoscope, press 7 for Virgo or something like that. Or, for maybe $2 a minute, you could call and get pet advice from a live person. And there was everything under the sun was in a 1-900 number. The prices varied considerably. I think the low end was 50 cents. I think it went up to $12 a minute for experts and stuff. And it was all billed to your landline because, again, this was before cell phones. And so I wrote a press release about that phenomenon with 1-900 numbers, this country being all the numbers being routed through it. And we sent that out, and I got picked up in the Financial Times, The Economist, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Red Herring, and I think 3 or 4 telecom trade publications. And so that was new. That was a lot of sales, a lot of phones ringing off the hook, people wanting to know more. It was magical. And I'm like, I wonder if I can do this again. And so I started doing more of the story-based press releases, trying to give people the elements for building a story. And we continue to get successes, none probably as much as that initial one. But, on average, I think 3 or 4 pickups for almost every press release that we issued. And it was so phenomenal in what it did to the business that I felt like I want to do this for other people. And fortunately, around the same time, as I was faxing, journalists would call and say, hey, could you remove our fax number and just start emailing it to us? And I remember it was like a celebration in the office when we went under 100 numbers, and I could keep the numbers on the fax machine and not have to reprogram it or delete them. And it continued to dwindle. And I just started building a Rolodex of email addresses. And I did that in my off time outside the telecom and business world, and launched about 27 years ago, e-releases in October of 1998. And I've been trying to get people to do more strategic releases and follow the story arc formula ever since.
And so what is the most surprising thing about your industry? So when people dive in and sort of learn about press releases and, the difference between storytelling versus just spitting out cold, hard facts that no one's interested in. So what else would be something that takes people by surprise, like when they learn about best practices and how you can help them fine tune their press releases and their craft?
I think it's the place where creativity is going to give you a huge edge. 97% of press releases that go over a wire, in our case, we partnered with PR Newswire. We're not emailing the releases to my Rolodex anymore. PR Newswire reached out to us over 10 years ago, liked what we were doing. They saw that our customer base is a customer base their salespeople have zero interest in reaching out to. They're looking for people who are willing to spend $1,700 for a national press release and $30,000 for a multimedia newsroom license and all these other bells and whistles. And my customers are probably spending, under $2,000 a year. And so it's been a good partnership. And what people don't realize is that with us, you get that national distribution of PR Newswire, which normally is be over $1,700. And with us, it's about a third of the price, maybe even closer to a quarter of the price with our new customer special. But that being said, 97% of the releases that go over the wire don't generate earned media. And that's what we call it when a journalist writes about you. And that's the ultimate goal. There's been a lot of people distracted by syndication. There's a lot of places online where you pay a fee, a couple $100 or less, and it'll syndicate your release where the release gets replicated on basically sections of websites that no one ever looks at or pays attention to. Hardly ever shows up in Google News or even Google Web because it's not great placement. And what my goal is still what it was way back when. I want a journalist to take what we send out and turn it into an article they've written. And that sort of credibility and signal of trust when a journalist writes about you can't be replicated any other way. So what I think people don't realize is if you look at the 3% of press releases that do get picked up, there's a lot of patterns there. And they apply to anybody. And so that's one of the things that I've been doing is educating my clients and basically anyone who will listen that these are the types of releases you could be doing that are strategic and much more likely to get media pickup. Because if you exist within that 3% world and you do press releases on those types of releases, not everyone's going to be a hit. But if you did a campaign of 6 to 8 releases over a year or a year and a half, you should get at least 2 or 3 of them that get measurable media pickup, earned media. And I could tell people all the time, anecdotally, that sometimes just one media pickup can be tremendous. I had one client who got picked up in Waste News. It was a trade magazine, and they actually develop recycling and waste facilities for cities. And they are they do everything, the entire facility they build. And they were contacted by a city in Australia who ended up ordering 3 facilities, and it was over $30 or $40 million business they got from just that one article of someone who didn't know that they existed and that they built everything. So many of these facilities thought you had to find dozens of contractors to work with and develop everything. And here was somebody who says, we handle everything and we come in with contractors who will set it up and it's a one-stop shop. So that just shows you the importance of getting the visibility in your industry, in your marketplace, and letting people know that you're there.
Building that awareness and visibility and credibility, I mean, that's important. Are there any industries you can think of where having some press release activity would be low-hanging fruit and something that would be easy to implement and really helpful, but that for whatever reason, that kind of entrepreneur or business person just doesn't think of press releases as something they should add to their marketing efforts? I mean, do you see the same pattern over and over where like, man, if only this type of business would realize that like they could get so much traction with press releases, but they just never seem to think of it? Or is it just kind of not really, where nothing has stood out as being a pattern, but you just see that widespread, there are lots of businesses that just aren't thinking of doing it?
I think a lot of people put it on the back burner as something that I'll get to. The strange thing about my industry over the last 27 years is during every recession or I guess problem, like during the pandemic, we grew. And we grow a lot. We grew 50% during the pandemic. And people were pivoting. They felt the need to communicate to their industry, their customers, people, what they're currently doing and how their operations have changed and how you can work with them. And during recessions, I think what happens is people cut off a lot of their paid advertising and they start thinking of things they put on the back burner that weren't very expensive. And so all of a sudden, press releases comes to mind. And then when the money starts back, they start to paid advertising. A lot of people don't like how unpredictable PR is. Like I said, it's hit or miss. And a lot of people like the paid advertising where they know what the conversion rate is, they know what they average and things like that. So it is one of those things that I find that we are neglected. But as soon as the economy starts to dip or there's a major pivot, like we saw with the pandemic, all of a sudden people start paying attention to press releases again. Either they have the time and now that they have the budget since they're not doing the paid advertising anymore and it's substantially cheaper. And I think that that's one of the reasons that people keep coming back to it. But I think that there's just a lot of opportunities for people who continue with it. Some of our best customers are the ones who continue to feed the media and get pickup over time. And when you get that pickup, not only does it bring in leads and customers from the readers and the audience, but you can take the link to that article and share it with your social media, share it with your leads. And what you'll find is if you convert at, say, 15% and you put earned media in front of them, you'll find that you'll get an uptick and maybe you convert at 20, 25% for the people that were exposed to that article. And the same thing with churn. There's a predictable rate at which you sort of lose people. Sometimes there's staffing changes and the new person feels like they have to review all the vendors that they work with and try someone new, or they just feel like maybe we should shop around and just give someone else a try. But if they see that earned media, they're less likely to feel that inclination. They'll be like, oh, we're with the right company. Here they are being written about by this journalist. There's a bit of clout with that and, this elevation of credibility. And so they're less likely to leave you. And the customers that people get from the audience, so the people who read these things, are often the most loyal and they're the least price sensitive. When I read a great article about a company that's doing something great, I often want to work with that company. I don't open a window and say, can I get this cheaper somewhere else? I really have that excitement with this company. And that gives you a huge advantage.
I think it's important to note that, because for a lot of folks, they think, okay, I'm going to send out press releases. It's just into the void, just it's gone. No one even looks at these. But the opposite is true. I think the media has a voracious appetite for their next story and their next thing to write about and talk about. And I mean, the producers and editors, everyone is looking for what to write about. So I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a huge appetite out there, and it really doesn't serve you as an entrepreneur not to try to help feed that.
Exactly. And in addition to that, people are now paying a lot more attention to press releases because of AI discoverability. Currently, with ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity, people are finding that they are giving a considerable amount of weight to recent media activity, including press releases. And the great thing about press releases is you get to write that. And so if there's a competitor who has an old article that's 2 years old or a press release that you've sent within the last 90 days, it's going to give precedence to you, given recency, over an established article. And so that's another method to get it. And if you get earned media as a result, then that'll be even more content that the AI will use. And so I've seen a lot of people moving to press releases for the AI benefit, but I tell them, still do strategic releases because earned media is the goal here. And you can get the AI assistance of being discoverable, but you can also get those opportunities for earned media as well if you're doing strategic types of releases.
And give us some case studies. What are some fun results that you've had where you've helped an entrepreneur or small business owner do something different and get some attention using a press release?
So I think the one I'm most proud of is I saved a person's life. I had someone who had used us for a few years. He's based in the New York area. He was Russian and he came to the United States and he testified in Congress against some of the oligarchs that he had relationships with in Russia. And he had amnesty and he was here and he was a successful entrepreneur in New York. And then there was a change of administration, which happens every 4 to 8 years or so. And all of a sudden, he found himself that his amnesty was taken back, and he appealed it. And I think $250,000 later, his lawyer had exhausted everything, and he had a plane ticket back to Moscow with a seat number on a flight in less than a week. And he had already received calls from people who worked for one of the oligarchs saying, "This is how soon we'll be at the airport when you land, and you won't make it to the end of the day." And he sent out a press release through me. I'd never done a release like that. It immediately got picked up by the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal generally always publishes the next day when it puts it online because they want it to coincide with their print edition. They will cover breaking news immediately like everyone does, but they consider this breaking news. And within a few hours, this person had been contacted by his local congressman and he was granted amnesty again and was not going to be on that flight. And he spent $300 on a press release for me after exhausting $250,000 through the legal system. And it took the right eyes seeing it, the Wall Street Journal recognizing this entrepreneur and his plight and the situation. I mean, this was someone who testified in Congress and named names and did some things to bring to light the situation in Russia. And he was going to be put back on a plane. He knew what his seat number was. And so that was really amazing because you never think of a PR as saving someone's life, but it is something that I'm probably, very proud of. We've had a lot of quirky people over the years. There's a client called Celebriducks that does rubber duckies that sort of are in the likeness of celebrities or people in history like Shakespeare and things like that. And he's been on The Tonight Show and with Conan O'Brien and gotten a lot of mileage out of that. And pretty much everything under the sun that you can think of that, because we work with so many different types of people, but we also work with a lot of people on Shark Tank. The producers recommend they do a press release before their episode airs. And I think the last time we checked, about 40% of the people there have used us. They actually recommend us, saying people have had good experiences with us. And, there's several of them have done longer term campaigns with us, Squatty Potty, Manscaped. And I found that a lot of them like to build a base of PR so that they get earned media And then they turn on advertising and they find that they convert lower with that base of credibility, that earned media that they get. It doesn't hurt that they were on a national TV show, but then getting these additional media pickups and putting those articles on their website and preserving them. And all of that sort of helps to build huge credibility and makes it easier to convert people when they do start paid advertising.
Do you consider your job to be a lifestyle job, or are you a workaholic and at the desk and keyboard 20 hours a day? So take us a little bit into that and sort of your own work philosophy for how to balance life with work
Sure.
the kind of overlap of both.
So I used to be a workaholic. And when I realized that I had huge turnover, and a friend who was in a marketing mastermind, who was an HR consultant, said, "Hey, I don't really work with small businesses, but I could probably assess what your problem is with your high turnover. I can interview your customers, your staff, and I could look at your job postings and tell you why you're hiring the wrong people." And then she came back a few weeks later after having done that and said, "Hey, your customers love your staff. They love the customer service they get. Your staff are not the problem. It's you. They leave because they feel like they can never do anything good because you're micromanaging them and always telling them, hey, next time you have a conversation, say it like this, or hey, that email was okay, but I prefer you write it like this." And there, she's like, people aren't going to always be able to talk in your style and your format and the way exactly that you want. You have to recognize that these are college educated people. They are competent and they're going to provide good customer service. And you just have to accept that you've hired the right people and let them talk in their own natural language. And so I said, okay. And I thought, just recognizing it now would solve it. It didn't. And that's when in April of 2015, I decided I had to leave the office because I couldn't be around it. I found myself always navigating back to behind a staffer, an editor, after they hung up the phone and said, "Hey, I think the next time when someone asks, maybe you could say it like this." And I was just like, ooh, I can't be trusted. And so I had talked to someone who had been there 2 years, and she was a little bit older than everyone else. And people often asked her questions anyways because they looked up to her. And I thought she would be the natural person to take over the office and this is someone that my HR person suggested that I let do that. And I then went from like 40 to 60 hours a week in my business to being like 30 to 40 hours a week on my business. And today I'm probably like 20 hours a week on my business. And a lot of it's like this, talking and educating people about PR and doing the stuff I'm passionate about. And, I feel so much freer now in the business, and it has become a lifestyle for me. The business revenue is like triple what it was in 2015. And I don't know that I would have gotten there if I was so focused on the minutia and hadn't backed away and started looking at the bigger picture and focusing more on strategy and education.
So you fired yourself, but it ended up being the best firing decision you've ever made.
Absolutely. And like I said, everybody that was there in 2015 is still there. And so I was the problem. And I think that there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are perfectionists, and I'm one of them. And I just had to recognize that I can't have every conversation that takes place in my business be the perfect marketing conversation that I would answer. I was always taught, never say no to someone who's got money. Find a way to make it work, to convince them, and don't use the word no, but say, wow, we don't exactly have that. Let me steer you here. And that's the way I wanted my employees to be, but I just had to recognize that's not going to happen. I need to move on. I can have a sales page where I write the copy that says something like that, but I have to recognize that the individuals who talk to customers are going to talk to them in a natural way, a professional way, and they're going to provide great customer service. And that's the ultimate purpose and goal of having those employees.
You do a lot of outreach now and you do a lot of education on PR. What is something that you want to say from this platform that we haven't already talked through on this episode that you want to share with listeners?
I think the big thing is a lot of people feel I'm too small to matter. I don't have anything newsworthy enough. And the truth is, journalists get the most accolades and positive reviews of their writing, often spotlighting companies that are small and no one knows about. Covering the Microsofts and Googles of the world, journalists don't get a lot of accolades for that. That's something that's expected. You just have to do. But when they bring up a new tool or company or service within their industry that they didn't know about, that's when people get excited and say, oh, I'm going to have to look into this. And those are the things that excite people. And for that reason, if you're a mom and pop or a very small business, journalists love to put the spotlight on you because they know you're deserving of it. And they also know that you're going to come across as more curated from them because it's very likely nobody or very few people in the industry know about you. And then secondly, there are ways to make yourself newsworthy. I have a free masterclass. It's less than an hour long. It's available at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And I challenge anybody to go through that 1 hour video and look at the materials. And I guarantee you'll probably be able to brainstorm a dozen newsworthy ideas for your business. It's things that you don't think of initially that could apply to anyone, like doing an industry survey. Anybody can do a survey within their industry. And by you doing it, it propels you to a position of thought leadership. And it has huge credibility, and you don't need a Rolodex of people to send a survey to. There are small and independent trade associations in every industry that would love to be contacted by you, and you give them a link to like a Survey Monkey link and say, hey, I'm doing a survey. I'll be sending out a press release in the coming weeks. Could you send this to your members? If you do that, I'll make sure you get mentioned in the press release that's going out nationally over PR Newswire. They know that they don't get a lot of media attention, and it costs $1,700 to go out nationally over PR Newswire. And so they see this as a win-win opportunity for them to get some media pickup as well. And I'd say 2/3 of the time, the first trade association we approach will say yes. And by you authoring that survey, getting the results, then picking out what the biggest aha moment is and focusing a press release on that one big aha moment, and then linking to all the questions and answers that you put on your website gets considerable pickup. On average, at least 4 earned media articles for every client who's done this. And there are several clients who routinely get 8 to 14 articles every time they do a survey or study like this. And a lot of them have turned it into an annual event that everyone looks forward to, and they cover these again and again with articles.
Amazing. And so social media is here to stay, obviously, and it's kind of a new part of our media world. And I know people who get their actual news, and I mean like political news and world news from social media. And so it's not really just the big publications like Wall Street Journal or whatever it is posting to social media. It's also sort of smaller mom and pop, just people who've decided to become almost a newscaster and to put out information, maybe their opinion. It used to be that if you were an author, if you were writing a book, you would send out a press release to announce your new book. You would also try to get reviewed by the different publications. And nowadays I've, heard of something called Book Talk, which is like TikTok, but a subset of TikTok for books and people writing books and people reading books and reviewing books. How has that played into your strategies, or what's your viewpoint on Book Talk and some of these social media outlets that have now encroached and become a part of PR?
I tell people that I don't really pay for placement. I know that there's a lot of Instagram book people and Book Talk people who take money for profiling and stuff like that. I always tell people try to do it organically, and I'm completely okay with that. I also recognize that a lot of people that people consider influencers are getting their material from press releases. The Newswire has done a complete 180, because when I started working with them like 15 years ago, they were kind of dragging their feet, letting bloggers have journalist access to the wire. And I pointed out to them at one point that there was one blogger in particular who had reached out to me trying to get help. And I said, this guy has more traffic than the leading trade publication. And they said, how do you know that? And I maybe it was closer to 17, 18 years ago, but I sent them to Alexa. And that was an old page tool that people had, and it would show the rankings. And they were really shocked at how influential this blog was. And so they opened their gates to bloggers. And today they've opened their gates to influencers. There's a lot of people on Instagram in particular that are really big in fashion. And some of them have relationships with fashion houses, but a lot of them just go to the newswire. And as soon as a fashion house or somebody that they cover in the fashion world posts something, they take the images, they put them on Instagram, and they cover it. And people are like, wow, this person knows as soon as it hits, they're newsmakers. And there's a guy I follow on TikTok called Snackalator who does the same thing with both fast food and grocery store products. When new snacks hit the shelves, he's reviewing press releases for those keywords and the food trades. And he's posting images of these new snacks that are hitting grocery store shelves over the next week or two. And again, people are looking at this guy like he's got the in with all of these manufacturers, and he doesn't. He said a couple of times, I'm just pulling these photos from the press releases from the newsroom, and that's where I'm getting the content. So I think it's really an exciting time because how we get news is evolving, but I love the fact that press releases are still playing a part in it. And I'd mentioned both video there with Instagram and images with Instagram. And there's video with, of course, with TikTok, but they're using the still photos of these products and things like that with someone standing in front of them talking. And so there's lots of opportunities, but start thinking of images and photos and the importance of that when you do a press release. Show your product, show your solutions and things like that. You don't need the polished photos that we used to have 20 years ago or 15 years ago with press releases, the very curated ones. A lot of the photos that you take today with your smartphone are completely fine for uploading and sending along with your press release.
All amazing tips. Well, before we part for the day, what are some words of inspiration or motivation for listeners who are maybe feeling they haven't gotten the visibility for their business that they want, and just how to encourage ourselves to constantly be out there and be our own champions and, put the word out? What would you say to those entrepreneurs today?
I think that it's one of those things that I tell you to give a try and be creative about it. Look at the free masterclass that I mentioned. If you're going to do PR, do a campaign of 6 to 8 releases. With a small business, it might take you a year and a half if you're doing them quarterly. I don't think you have to do them weekly or even every month. I think that's not a sustainable cadence for the average small business, but find what works for you, maybe once a quarter, and do strategic types of releases. The 3% that I've sort of talked about and go more in depth with at that masterclass, and give it a try, an entire PR campaign. I think you'll be really surprised how easy it is, especially if you're willing to put character over something like competency. We are living in a world where people who are willing to stick their head out and be a contrarian, that's one of the newsworthy strategic ideas I have, where everybody in your industry is saying, hey, electric cars are great. But if you're the one person who raises his hand and says, hey, electric cars aren't so great. Putting out a fire with a lithium battery might take 8 fire trucks. And what are we going to do with these cars at the end of their life? We're just creating more problems and things like that. So it can come across being credible and also contrarian. That's one of these great strategies that I have. And, just putting yourself out there, being creative, finding what you're willing to be comfortable with, and giving PR a shot is really great. And again, that free masterclass is at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And all my social media is on my website, including a direct link to my LinkedIn. And feel free to call or email, and you'll only speak to an editor. We have no salespeople at eReleases. There's no quotas or commissions, and we're pretty much straight shooters. And, we do deal with people from time to time that we just feel like we're not a good fit because we're not great for everybody, especially like the supplement industry and things like that, where there's concerns with the media in regards to health claims and things like that. But we're pretty good at educating people and walking them through their first PR, their first press release, their first PR campaign.
Well, Mickie, it's been so great to have you on the show. And again, everyone, go to ereleases.com/plan if you want to watch that great strategy and free video that Mickie has loaded onto there. We will also make that link available at our guest vault, where we keep all of the freebies and resources and tools that our guests share with us. And that's at podcastguestgift.com. Mickie, thank you so much for sharing your time and all of your knowledge about PR with us today.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and if you leave a review on iTunes, I promise I will read every single review. If you know someone who makes a full-time living from part-time work, and maybe this is you, please visit lifestylesolopreneur.com to nominate a guest or to nominate yourself. Because remember this, money doesn't buy happiness. But money in the hands of a happy person, there is no greater tool.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Get Shift Done program. It's a lifestyle-changing online class to help you define your business and lifestyle ambitions and to set goals in a way you've never experienced before. This class will 10x your daily productivity with methods that will blow your mind. And if you use a coupon code podcast, the class tuition is 99% off. Visit GetShiftDone.com to enroll today.